Operation State Solutions for National Challenge is our most boring and least contentious topic at the PPPF seminar. I fully expect a fully engaged audience with lots of controversy and hopping around and people eager to say things. As the moderator, I'm John Funn of Fox News and National Review. As the moderator, my job is to be moderate and let everyone speak, and also then to be referee so that you get to have your say, but that no one person gets to dominate the conversation. This is certainly the second most spirited event I will have attended this week. On Tuesday, I was in Washington for the swearing in of the new Congress, and there was much gnashing of teeth. I got to see Joe Biden, the vice president. What is it that Kent Hans called him at lunch, our crazy uncle, our crazy national uncle? He got to swear in 14 senators in person, one at a time, and 13 of them were Republicans and 1 Democrat. By the time he was finished, he thought he had been through the ringer. Then there was Harry Reid, who was AWOL. He had a sad accident. He didn't even show up for the first day. And believe me, it's not going to be the first day that he will wish that he didn't show up, because I think Mitch McConnell was going to run a completely different Senate. Then we had Nancy Pelosi, who for the 3rd time in a row had to hand the Speaker's gavel over, the gavel that she used to own. She had 2 words for the incoming majority, which is now up to 247, the greatest number of Republicans to serve in the House of Representatives since Herbert Hoover. And you might remember after that some mistakes were made.
What were 2 words?
Well, they were not happy birthday. She did not graciously hand over the gavel. So this will be a piece of cake compared to what I had to go through on Tuesday. But we're going to have a lot of fun, and we're also going to perhaps shed some light on this issue. The speakers, just to know how this will work, the speaker is going to have between 5 and 7 minutes to make opening presentations, say anything they want. I will give them a little bit of leeway, but if you see me sliding over and standing over them,
give us the hook.
Yeah, well, it's not the hook, but it's just a sign that you don't want someone looming over you the rest of the time you're speaking. And then I'm going to have some questions so there can be some interaction among the panelists, where they can pose challenges and presentations between themselves. And then we're going to go to the audience, and we're going to do as much as we can with your questions. And I'll just give you a fair warning. Because we have limited time, when you stand up to ask a question and you're called on, I hope to see a thought bubble sort of appear over your head and a question mark sort of appear slowly but surely in that thought bubble, so that at the end of the statement there's a question mark. If I see a thought bubble that doesn't have a question mark forming, I won't be seeing you. I'll be moving on to the next person. So just so you know, I'm going to be fair, but I'm going to be firm. Question, not comment. And if it does not count as a question, when you make a statement and say, what do you think about that? Okay. So now we begin. Senator Estes is from Wichita Falls. I think that's the town that John Tower was from, right?
That's correct.
Very good. See, I know a little bit about Texas history. I'm not just a complete Yankee. Represents Senate District 30. Has served in the Texas Senate since 2001. Chairman of the State Affairs Committee, Committee on Agriculture, Rural Affairs, and Homeland Security, which of course bears on this topic today. Vice Chairman of the Natural Resources Committee, sits on the Finance and Business and Commerce. This is a busy man. And was appointed to the Legislative Budget Board by outgoing Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst in 2014. Senator Estes.
Well, thank you, John. Great to be here with you. Use a little bit of my time because he mentioned 2 of the people that are in this joke. Tell you a joke. By the way, thanks to TPPF. Y'all are a great resource. I want to recognize my soon-to-be colleague here, Bob Hall. Glad you're coming in, my friend. Let's give him a hand. Any other senators or soon-to-be senators in the hallway? Okay. There's one, Larry Taylor. Give him a hand. Good man. Happy to play my part. Been doing it for 13 years. President Obama made an official visit to Arkansas, and he comes back on Air Force One to Washington, D.C., and there's Joe Biden at the bottom of the steps to meet him. And as Obama comes down the steps, he's carrying a couple of hogs, one under each arm. And the vice president goes, "Mr. President, what do you got those two hogs under each arm, a hog under each arm for?" He said, "Well, Joe, I've been to Arkansas on a state visit. These are official Razorbacks." And he said, "I got one for Hillary and I got one for Nancy Pelosi." And Biden thought for a minute and he said, "Good trade, Mr. President." Okay, a few years ago, the Lieutenant Governor added onto my committee assignment, the chair of my committee, Homeland Security. Been down there, seen what's going on. By no means an expert in it, but I know I've been with a lot of experts. The situation is terrible. Let me just make 3 quick points. Here's the first one. The folks in Washington, D.C. created this problem, okay? At the end of the day, they are the only ones that can finally solve it. And let me just tell you, you go through the Constitution, the Naturalization Clause, the Commerce Clause, the Foreign Affairs Clause, all of these things, our founding fathers did not leave it to the states to make immigration policy and to deal with foreign countries. It's under the purview of the United States government. I'm honked off about it because we've spent $500 million, maybe even more than that. We've got our Texas Guard down there, which is not a long-term solution. I heartily support them down there, but it's not a long-term solution. The feds owe us $500 million at least. And I asked one of my colleagues here on the panel, what's the chances of us getting reimbursed for what we've done? And, you know, he just kind of laughed. It's pretty much zero. Secondly, that we've got to, I know they're connected, but border security and immigration policy, they're related, but they're different animals, okay? And we have to secure the border. We don't have to have a good or a bad or an indifferent immigration policy, but we have, Reagan said it pretty well. He said, a nation without, I'm just paraphrasing here, a nation without secure borders is not a nation. That's a direct quote from Ronald Reagan. So I think Texas is doing a lot. We're probably going to have to do more. We're looking to the federal government for some leadership. And by the way, our people, our men and women on the border, they're heroes. They go in harm's way. We have spent money on boats, helicopters, airplanes, personnel, and it's time the feds stepped up to the plate. I talked to the director of public safety. He said he thinks we stop about 20% of what's coming across. And we're not talking about just people coming over that are wanting a better life. We're talking about dangerous drug cartels, vicious people that have sex slaves, they have mules, and when, in Mexico, 15 people are beheaded and their bodies are thrown in a ditch, that's just people that didn't get the drugs across for them. We have the technology to do this. Some places it can be a physical wall, but it needs to be a technological wall and a people wall. We've gone to the moon. We can do this. We're looking for leadership in Washington, D.C., and thank goodness now we've got a Congress that's going to address this. Hopefully in the future we'll have a president that will address this. Until we do, the Texas legislature is going to do everything in its power to try to stem this tide. These people are vicious. They have no place in our country, and they need to be stopped, these drug cartels. You can tell I'm kind of torqued up over this, but I think everybody in this room is. So God bless Texas for standing in the gap while the United States government has abjectly failed its citizens. Thank you.
Some very good points there, although the moon analogy is a dicey one, because yes, we did go to the moon, and the last time we were there was 1973.
You're right.
JoAnn Fleming is with us with Grassroots America. She is a leader in the constitutional conservative movement. She is from East Texas. She has been the two-term chair of the Texas Legislature's Tea Party Caucus Advisory Committee. In this unpaid role, she has worked directly with grassroots leaders from across the state and with legislators to develop and pass constitutionally conservative bills. She's a self-retired county commissioner, a sought-after public speaker, and I have heard from sources today, greatly feared in some quarters of the state.
Thank you, John. I'm just a very nice, sweet Southern lady.
And warm and fuzzy, too.
That's right, native Texan. I want to thank TPPF for inviting me. I do a lot of work with them on the Conservative Budget Coalition. We're looking for a conservative budget. Representative Workman and Senator Estes, so I'll go ahead and get those licks in right now. I want to say, first of all, that the main thing that we all need to keep focused on is the rule of law. The rule of law has been abandoned in the United States, and if we continue to abandon the rule of law and to allow our elected officials in Washington, D.C., we're going to end up with the problems that we're seeing today in Europe. The rule of law is what binds a society together and keeps us from spinning into chaos. So I'm going to read a statement from the Texas Department of Public Safety, and I want to say right now, Grassroots America and the grassroots groups that I work with across the state of Texas support law enforcement, and we support the United States Border Patrol, the rank and file men and women who put their lives on the line every single day on the border. We support them. We do not support an administration that has gutted that agency and keeps them from doing the job that they take an oath to do. And it is about time that we, the people, held our elected officials accountable and told them that they must stop using our military and our law enforcement as political props. These are real men and women with real lives, and many of them have lost lives. I'll remind you of Agent Vega on August 3rd of last year, who lost his life at the hands of 2 illegal aliens who had been deported multiple times. Agent Vega was a real human being. He was shot in cold blood in front of his parents and his wife and his children. And because bullets do not follow jurisdictional lines, I am afraid that our men and women of Department of Public Safety, the Texas Rangers, state law enforcement, will soon be next. We support law enforcement. They need to be given the tools to do the job. The federal government is not giving the federal agents the tools they need to do the job. I am happy to say that the state of Texas has done a fantastic job in giving the Department of Public Safety the tools they need to do the job. I've been on the border. Went down there in July, unannounced, did not have a guided tour. Went down there with other grassroots leaders, and it is frightening. I thought I knew about the border, but until you've seen it in person, you cannot possibly know what it is like. And with the concentration of the resources in the Rio Grande Valley, I will have to say that in the neighboring sector of Laredo, and even in the Rio Grande Valley sector, it is still wide open, even with our state presence there. DPS says the most significant public safety and homeland security vulnerability in Texas is an unsecured border with Mexico, which has enabled the Mexican cartels to become multi-billion-dollar international crime syndicates that dominate the U.S. drug and human smuggling and trafficking markets. Friends, law enforcement in our state face multinational gangs and cartel members who are using military tactics against them. We, the people of Texas, need to ask our officials to go a step further. We need to, in the state of Texas, eliminate every single magnet that attracts an illegal here. We need to close the social safety net, and there are plenty of loopholes in our social safety net that allow them in. As a former county commissioner, I know about some of those. We need to, and that includes repealing in-state tuition. We also need to ask our elected officials to use the United States Constitution. Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 of the United States Constitution says, Well, it's supposed to be on the screen. Somebody was supposed to be helping with that. I'll read it. No state shall, how many minutes do I have? I'll just keep going. No state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty of tonnage, keep troops or ships of war in time of peace, enter into any agreement or compact with another state, or with a foreign power, or engage in war, unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. Our governor, with executive power, our legislature, our attorney general, have the authority to invoke Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 of the Constitution, and they have the ability to begin the process of looking at state compacts. I would submit to you that we need to start with our 24 sister states who are suing the federal government over the lawless act of amnesty by executive fiat. We start with those states, and we go into a state compact situation, which, by the way, Congress would have to approve. We have a Republican House and Senate. It is time for Republicans to either put up or shut up and go home. It is time for them to protect the rule of law and to get us back to the United States Constitution, which their first responsibility is to protect the life, liberty, and property of the citizens of the United States and those who are here legally. I'll rest at that. Thank you.
Nowrasteh is with the Cato Institute, where he's the immigration policy analyst. His work has appeared in many publications, including Texas newspapers. And he is a Southern California native. He received his BA in economics from George Mason University, one of the great universities in this country, and a Master of Science in Economic History from the London School of Economics.
Thanks, John. Thanks, TPPF, and thanks everybody for having me here today. First, I want to apologize. I brought the DC weather with me, and I'm really sorry about that. When I left DC, it was 20 degrees and snowing. Here, it's about 20 degrees this morning. Hopefully, you don't get any snow. So, I want to begin by showing you what the current immigration system looks like in this country.
That's right.
If you want to see a better example of a big government, socialist-inspired, progressive-designed, labor union-backed legal immigration system, you cannot find a better one around.
That's right.
This system was designed over the course of about 60 years by labor unions, and this is the type of system that a lot of people who don't understand the immigration system are defending. If you take a look at these programs, there is no green card available for a low-skilled worker to come here legally unless they are closely related to an American. I'll say that again. There is no green card available for a low-skilled worker to come here legally unless they're closely related to an American. If this system existed back when our ancestors came here, virtually none of us would be here today, because none of us would qualify for almost any of these categories. This is the problem that has been created in Washington, D.C. by decades and decades of destroying the law in this country. There are 3 actions that Texas can take on its own without federal oversight or the Congress doing anything to try to solve these problems. Fixing that immigration system is beyond the scope of it. That's going to have to be through Congress and the federal government. These are 3 things that you can do, and I'm going to talk about each and every one. First one, welfare reform. Easy, simple, popular. E-Verify, another one. I think it's a terrible idea, and I'm going to go through why it is specifically. It is politically possible, but it will be a disaster for Texas if you do it. Third one is a big long shot, but it is constitutional and it is possible, and we wrote a very long piece about it, and that is creating a guest worker visa program for Texas going forward. The goal in all of these programs is to increase the benefits from immigration and to decrease the costs. I'm going to go through the first one, welfare reform. Simple. Deny all non-citizens access to all means-tested welfare benefits in the United States, in the state of Texas. Easy to do, simple. This will decrease budget outlays, increase the number of people in the workforce. It's good for the economy, good for everything. An example, temporary assistance in needy families. This last bit right here I think is crazy. To be in the country legally and get welfare, You have to have been here for 5 years on a green card. If you're illegal, you have no recourse. If you're on a worker visa, you have no recourse. But to be on a lawful permanent residency or green card, you have to be here for 5 years to get access to this. Texas has the power to increase that, make it until you become a citizen. Easy. In 2013, Texas government spent $126 million on temporary assistance to needy families for non-citizens. This is easy to do, should have been done a long time ago, can be done tomorrow. Second action, E-Verify. For those of you who don't know, E-Verify is an electronic eligibility employment verification system. Through such a program, every new hire must be checked by the employer through a central government database to make sure that they're eligible to work in this country. Now, I may be too much of a libertarian, but that is darn close to a national biometric identity card, which has also been proposed. The goal of such a system, this is the stated goal, is to exclude illegal immigrants from the workforce. In other words, to turn off the jobs magnet. The idea is if they can't work here, then they won't come, and this will solve the problem. This is an expensive business regulation. On average, it costs $147 for each run of E-Verify. Now, why does it cost that much? Most of you guys know E-Verify probably. You might be business owners who've used it. Probably hasn't cost you anything. That's an average. For most people who use it, every time it costs nothing. But for those people who have run through it and it turns out a worker might or might not be an illegal immigrant, the legal fees can be in the tens of thousands of dollars. It's a disaster. 2% of legal immigrants who are legal and allowed to work are flagged as illegal, and it takes at least 105 days to go through the Social Security office to fix it. Now, my wife recently changed her name to my last name. It took 2 days, and she had to sit in the office for 8 hours. If they can't figure that out, you think they're going to figure this out? If this error rate is applied to Texas, 27,000 legal Texans will be denied the ability to work under E-Verify, legal workers, and about 30,000 American-born citizens will be denied the ability to work under E-Verify. First off, and this is worse, E-Verify does not turn off the jobs magnet. The state of Arizona mandated E-Verify in 2008 for all hires. For one thing, only 78% of all the hires are screened. The system is full of fraud. Where it is enforced, what you see is the destruction of jobs. You see no natives moving into these professions. You just see illegal immigrants leaving them, and then the industry collapsing. And the biggest effect it has had in Arizona is it has decreased the estimated wage of illegal immigrants from Mexico by 5%. That doesn't sound like it turns out the job magnet to me, folks, but it's really expensive. To give you an example, the average wage gain for a Mexican moving from Mexico to Arizona is 253%. Big wage increase, right? With E-Verify, it's a mere 241%. This is government at its finest. If it works, it hurts the economy. If it doesn't work, it hurts the economy. My recommendation is to avoid E-Verify at all costs. Third action, state-based visas. Design and run your own state-based guest worker visa program to allow lawful migrants to come to the government country to work. I can tell you more about that in the questions. It's constitutional and it's legal. Why do I support this program? Because it will end almost all illegal immigration into Texas on its own. In the early 1950s, there were 2 million illegal immigrants in the United States. Within the course of 2 years after they created a guest worker visa program called the Perennial visa, the number of illegal immigrants dropped by 90% and cross-border traffic by 95%. Why? Because all the illegal immigrants who were coming in realized that they could get a visa, piece of cake. All the American employers realized all they need to do is they can hire illegal workers, piece of cake. It decreased it better than any other government program, any other enforcement apparatus ever designed. It was ended in 1965 due to union pressure. Like a lot of good things in this country, it was killed by unions. You want to end illegal immigration, this is the way you fix it. You can't regulate a black market, folks. I'm a libertarian, I hate to say that. I hate all regulation. You can't regulate a black market, though. You can only regulate a legal market. Conclusion, welfare reform, easy piece of cake, do it. E-Verify, disaster, won't work, avoid it. State-based guest worker visa program, constitutional, will work, and it is guaranteed to end illegal immigration in the state of Texas and the United States without damaging the economy. Thank you.
If you go down to the Lyndon Johnson Library, which by the way is a wonderful exhibit on famous people who were active in the 1960s right now, But if you go through all of the exhibits in the Lyndon Johnson Library on his presidency, you will not see anything on immigration or Lyndon Johnson ending the Bracero program. The truth of the matter is, as Robert Caro has demonstrated, in the 1950s, when Dwight Eisenhower hired generals who had worked for him during D-Day to clean up the immigration problem, and there were deportations, and there was the Bracero program, the biggest opponent Dwight Eisenhower had was Lyndon Johnson, who was then the majority leader of the United States Senate. Lyndon Johnson was doing the bidding of ranchers and growers in Texas who wanted illegal labor because it was cheaper and because they could exploit it. And in 1964, when Lyndon Johnson ran for president, Cesar Chavez and the unions did go to him. This is a documented historical fact. And they said, the price of our support for you in this election is that you, by executive order, executive fiat, does that sound familiar? Will end the Bracero program. And in 1964, the last year of the program, we had 180,000 arrests at the border. By 1976, we had over 1 million, and it has never fallen below 1 million since. So there is some interesting history there. Representative Paul Workman is our last speaker. First elected in 2010, Representative Workman has served the people of the 47th District. He is a member of the House Committee on Business and Industry, Select Committee on Transportation, Funding, Expenditures, and Finance. He serves on several other committees, and the Joint Committee on Human Trafficking, which of course is very integral to this issue. Representative Workman serves by appointment on the Energy Council, which facilitates the development of national energy policy matters. Representative Workman.
Thank you. And thank you to TPPF for asking me to serve on this panel. Without question, we all can agree that the federal government has failed in its duties along the border and to protect the state from illegal immigration. And because they have failed, I believe that we have no choice but to step in and do it. There are 8 major drug cartels that operate along the northern Mexico border. 7 of those drug cartels have command and control centers in the state of Texas. They are controlling the flow of drugs and humans north and guns and money south from right here in our borders. It is only a matter of time until the violence that we witness in Mexico starts happening here in our state. We already know that there are some cartel-on-cartel violence that are going on in the southern part of our state, but more of that will come if we don't do something about it. The surge of DPS officers that's been going on now for 8 or 9 months, and the National Guard that's been down there, is a temporary solution to a long-term problem. For that reason, I'm going to propose, and I've got bill prepared to file, to create the Texas Border Patrol. Now, this unit will be a unit of the Department of Public Safety, and its sole mission will be to deal with the criminal aspect of illegal aliens coming across the border. It will be expensive, and I don't know whether all of my colleagues are going to be willing to do that, but we're going to push this idea and see if we can't get it done. We also, within the bill, it directs the Attorney General to send a bill to Washington to get paid, but as Senator Estes has already pointed out, the likelihood of that is pretty low. But we will be doing that in an attempt. It creates 1,000 new positions for DPS to be permanently stationed along the border. We're going to try to use, the bill calls for us to use previous current peace officers and veterans of the Iraq and Iran wars that can be quickly trained and put into the field to act as the Texas Border Patrol. They will get special training for border type security. So we're hoping to be able to get that going and get some traction on that and see if we can't provide for our own permanent security along the border. That is the #1 issue. Immigration, I believe, will take care of itself down the road, but right now we've got to focus on border security, and that's going to be my focus. Thank you.
I commend all the speakers for giving us a flavor of their views. And also leaving lots of time for discussion. I guess I wanted to open this up with a couple of questions of my own. It's been exactly 50 years. It was 1965 that we had our last major revision of our entire immigration law, authored by Ted Kennedy and signed into law by Lyndon Johnson. I'd like to ask the panelists, not all of you have to answer, but those who wish to, laws like that don't last 50 years without a reason, or several reasons. Why do you think, or what do you theorize is the reason why we have not changed our immigration law for 50 years? Anyone?
I'll go first. I think the number one reason why we haven't changed this in 50 years is the same reason why we haven't deregulated the rest of the U.S. economy that much in 50 years. It has its own bureaucratic inertia that pushes to maintain the system. And there is also, I think, amongst a lot of policymakers, a denial of the reality of what it takes to control the border and to control legal immigration, which is to have a legal immigration system that's functional and that takes account of reality, unlike this mess. I mean, this is like something the Soviet Union would come up with to like plan steel production.
Actually, it looks like Obamacare.
It does.
It's about the same thing. But if you think you can plan immigration in the same way you can plan, the healthcare system, then I've got some bridges in New York to sell you. But I think it's the desire. People don't realize that you need to have a more open immigration system to allow low-skilled workers to come here lawfully, and that will take the pressure off of the border and channel them into the legal system. I think that realization is too un-PC or whatever for most people to realize.
Well, Alex, let me challenge you on one thing. There are a lot of Americans who believe, excuse me, we're entering a technological new age. We're in the information economy. Why in the world should we want low-skilled workers being sent into this country, even if they're just guest workers, when they're Americans who are unemployed and on welfare, and they could be gainfully employed and paying taxes, and they're American citizens, and they should be first in line?
American citizens should be first in line. The welfare system is an enormous problem when it comes for everybody in this country, and reform in welfare should absolutely be up there. The issue with guest workers is it's always more expensive to hire and go through the bureaucratic process and pay the fees to hire a guest worker than it is to hire a legal American. That's why employers hire Americans first when they have the option to do so and there's legal workers available. But if you want to control illegal immigration, which is the whole main point about this, then you need to have a legal way to do it. And I think that the economy is better at determining the workers that the economy needs. You all as employers or consumers are better able to do that than bureaucrats telling us which skill levels we need. Every 10 years they come up with a new report at the Department of Labor that says where the employment growth is going to be over the next decade or two, and they're always off by like millions in every direction. They can't figure it out. So perhaps we should leave it up to the economy to decide what skills are demanded.
Does anyone else like to comment on why they think our immigration laws haven't changed in 50 years, or we can move on to another topic? Okay. We have an interesting collision.
So do you have the idea? What are you?
I'm a moderator.
I know, but come on, handle your own question there.
That means I have the best of both worlds. I can either choose to answer any question I wish, or I can choose not to answer. Actually, but I will have some remarks at the very, very end, but I don't want to steal time from the audience and from you. But I will have, I'll save myself a couple of seconds at the end. We're going to have a collision between legal theories in the next year. The Obama administration apparently thinks the president has the divine right of a king to make up the law as he goes along and to basically sweep away immigration law and interpose his own personal preferences. That's going to be tested in the courts over the next year. My question is, this presents an interesting opportunity because let's say Texas were to theoretically assert its rights to do the things that have been discussed here as a state, including even the guest worker program, including Texas Border Patrol, that was Representative Workman's idea, all of these things. That, of course, is going to be challenged in court by what we know in Washington as the usual suspects, namely the ACLU and Nowrasteh and various other people. Given this conflict we're going to see in the courts, how do you see this playing out? The courts looking at the president's ability to rewrite immigration law on his own, and a state perhaps asserting its rights under the Constitution to secure its own border. Do you have any thoughts on how that might play out legally and what the prospects would be, and what could Texas get away with now that Obama's trying to get away with so much on the executive branch level?
I guess I'll go again. I'll say, looking at the text of the Constitution, I think it should be pretty clear to everybody what the president did was probably unconstitutional, almost guaranteed to be unconstitutional. But in the same token, so is this probably too. So we have like hundreds of years of unconstitutional law combined. So what will the courts decide? I don't know. I think that's like trying to read tea leaves a lot of times. Not the good Tea Party kind, but the other kind of tea leaves. So who knows? But I do think this is a goal. I don't think you're going to undo what the president did administratively. No matter what the courts rule, I think that this is going to be set in stone because of just the administrative bureaucracy and how it unfolds.
The cow is out of the barn?
It's out of the barn, and you're not going to and the barn's burned down. So I don't think you're going to put it back in or reconstruct the barn. But I do think this is an opportunity for a lot of Republicans in Congress to do a conservative immigration reform along the lines of what they want to do. And I focused on the guest worker visa part. You already know my opinion on that. But Republicans, by and large, especially on the high end and on the high-skilled sector, favor far more looser and more open immigration system than we have right now. I mean, Ted Cruz said there should be 5 times more skilled immigrants to the United States. I'd raise them 10 times more and see how he pushes back.
So Cruz wants more legal immigrants on the high end.
He does. And a lot of these guys who complain a lot about illegal immigration, I do share those feelings, understand that the most important way to fix it, a big component of that is a legal system that works.
Well, a lot of grassroots conservatives and Tea Party people are very upset by what they view as political pusillanimity by leaders.
What?
Pusillanimity.
You use big words around.
You're in Texas, man.
Bill O'Reilly uses it, so I can use it. And
What does it
I
mean?
work with Bill O'Reilly, so I'm getting away with his word. Political pusillanimity is basically, it means a legislator who has the backbone of a chocolate eclair.
That's right.
That's what it means. We have 2 members of the Texas State Legislature here, not to put them on the spot, but I will put them on the spot. One from the House and one from the Senate. There's a lot of grassroots conservatives out there, I think Ms. Fleming might be one of them, who say you should do more as a state legislature. What do you think is politically and constitutionally possible, and what would you support for the Texas State Legislature and the Texas governor to do on their own to tackle these immigration issues beyond what you've already personally discussed?
Well, I'll jump in because I've been doing this for 13 years. And
The microphone.
yeah, this is really maybe it's been discussed and I wasn't listening, but I'm very intrigued by Alex's notion that Texas could have a guest worker program, a Texas-style visa for our own state. I don't believe it's ever even been discussed among the legislative circle.
That's why we have meetings like you.
So yeah, and I don't know. Talmadge, you're out there. Have we ever talked about that in my office when you've come by? I don't think we have. So I always felt like George W. Bush was right about one thing, and that is that we do need a guest worker program that absolutely does not lead to amnesty. I don't think that's a perfect solution, but I do think that it's something to look at. And I don't know whether the feds are, you're asking me why the federal government hadn't done anything in 50 years. I don't know. I try to never go to Washington, D.C. I don't.
Smart man.
So I don't have a clue about that. But Texas does not need to wait for the federal government to act, because if our citizens are unsafe, we have to act. So I'm very intrigued by this idea, and Alex would like to explore that more, and if that's a possibility, Texas could lead the way once again in something that might be to chip away at this huge problem.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time you've been a national leader.
Yeah. So we'll look at that. Okay.
Next question. Clearly, within the conservative movement, there's some tension between people who have a more libertarian perspective and people who have a more traditional perspective on immigration. I wanted to ask the panelists, any of who are interested, we know the differences between those two views. What is the common ground? Because both views are represented in the Texas legislature. What is the common ground between those two views that we can build on? What do each of you think both sides could be found to agree on?
That sounds like a great question for Representative Workman.
Once again, the Senate passes the buck to the State House. Once again.
Tell us your two sides again, make that clear.
Well, one would be that the needs of the economy mean that we have to, we cannot as a practical matter have only a law enforcement solution. We have to have a solution that also takes into account the needs of the economy as expressed by employers telling us what their needs are. The other would be the rule of law is paramount. The rule of law cannot be traduced. It cannot be diluted. We take care of the rule of law first, last, and always. And that means border enforcement.
Well, let me go back to what I said before. In some ways, I think it's helpful to kind of, although they're put together and you can't de-link it, that border security and immigration reform are kind of two different animals. One we must do. The other one, we need to do, but we don't have to do. And I don't know whether I have enough faith in Washington, D.C., even if there's a presidential change, hopefully it'll be someone that's a little more conservative than what we've had. But I don't know, I don't know.
That's not that hard, is it?
No, let me just say, I think everybody here is either libertarian or Republican or conservative. There may be some liberal Democrats in here. But listen to me closely. How did Barack Obama get elected a second time? We sit here and think we're taking over. What's that gal's name up in Massachusetts?
Elizabeth Warren.
She may be the next president. Then what are we going to do? Texas, in my opinion, sort of kind of has its act together with conservatives, and I don't see that big a division between traditional Republicans and Tea Party people, because you know what? If we allow the press and different people to divide us, then it's going to be Elizabeth Warren. Okay, so here is my call, and I don't know what I am. I at 11 years old, I marched in my first political parade for Barry Goldwater. So am I a traditional Republican or am I a Tea Party? I would say Barry Goldwater was the first Tea Party guy, okay, for you students of history.
Wrong tea.
Yeah. And so it is not time for us to be divided. We may have some ideas that are different, and that's good. That's a good thing. But as far as and you want to split off and start a third party, well, welcome to H. Ross Perot, okay, and Bill Clinton getting in against George H.W. Bush. So we have to unite, and we have to realize that we're not a bunch of white people, okay? We're not a party of skin color. We're a party of ideas. And so my call to people is, let's don't be divisive. Let's unify ourselves as good, rock-solid conservatives, and we can do it. And I love the Tea Party folks. I am Tea Party. It used to be Craig Linton Estes. I changed my name to Craig Tea Party Estes. It's all right, Gene, isn't it?
John,
Now,
if I might.
there's a man who's trying to reach.
I really didn't.
John,
But
if I
I'd like
might.
to.
I'd like to say, what I hear people as I go across the state, speaking to different groups, Tea Party groups, 912 groups, Republican groups, the common theme is we want elected officials to do the things that they can do. We have been calling for closing off the loopholes and doing the
What are the
things.
loopholes?
Well, the loopholes, for example, the things that we saw up there, the TANF, the loopholes in welfare access, the social safety net, health care. You want to talk about a runaway cost in local government is indigent health care. And as a former county commissioner, I can tell you that if a county does not adopt a more stringent standard than what the state says, you will have all manner of illegals, not only the ones in your own county, but in surrounding counties.
Has any county done that yet?
Yes, we did when I was on the court. I don't know what they've
Are they
done
still
since.
doing it?
I would hope so. Last time I did a Public Information Act request, they showed me their standards, and they had higher eligibility standards, which a county can
So a
set.
county can do that.
But what we want is to get back to the things the state legislature can do, and they can cut off the social safety net. They can close those loopholes. They can do some things that we've been asking them to do the last 2 legislative sessions.
Why do you think they're not doing them?
I think that there is a cheap labor lobby that has their ear. And I think also that it is a failure of leadership, because we have had bills that have been held up in committee that never saw the light of day. And I will say, over on the Senate side, Jane Nelson had Senate Bill 7, I believe it was, on closing the welfare loophole that TANF represents. She couldn't get it out of committee. And by the way, Republicans are in charge. So we're saying that we have missed the last 2 legislative sessions, which had some easier exits off this disastrous course we're on, and we passed those exits and we didn't do anything. So now we're sitting here on the precipice of a constitutional crisis. So here's what the Grassroots, I believe I'm hearing them say, this is what my organization says, is the state of Texas needs to press the point. And if the state of Texas leads the way in pressing the point with the federal government, let's have our day in court and let's go ahead and get back to the rule of law.
You make some powerful points, but I wanted to ask you something. I know
Yes.
you primarily lobby the Texas legislature, but the border issue, of course, is also involves national
Sure.
issues. Specifically, what would you do on border enforcement at the border?
Well, the Congress, it says, in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4, the powers of Congress, it says the Congress shall have the power to establish
I understand who has
So,
the power.
well,
What would
the
you
Congress
specifically do?
needs to...
You're queen for the day. What would you do?
Well, Congress needs to assume its constitutional authority, and they need to act. Specifically, when Texas and 24 other states bring them a state compact that addresses
That
these
doesn't address
issues,
border security.
it can in state compacts. Yes,
Do you
sir.
have any specific proposals for border security?
Yes, they need to fund border security. They need
already
to give
have.
them no, sir. No, sir.
No.
Funds have been
Enforcement is separate.
diverted.
Funding is there. Funding has gone up.
Okay, well, let's talk about...
Alex, what's the funding situation?
The funding situation has increased by 500% in the last 20 years. I'm sorry, by 900% in the last 20 years, and there are 5 times more Border Patrol agents along the southwest border than
Not
there
in
were
Texas.
1992.
Not in...
No,
That's
that's
exactly...
separate than the money.
That's a separate issue, but the number and the size has grown as much as the
Ms.
rest of
Fleming,
the
do you
federal
have
government.
different numbers?
Yes. In
What do you
fact,
do?
I will tell you from having discussions with U.S. Border Patrol, they have been diverted from Border Patrol going back into the interior of the country, doing things like community outreach.
Okay, that's policy, but do you have a disagreement that there's been more funding?
No, I will just say this, that funding for equipment, when you have U.S. Border Patrol that cannot get their night vision equipment replaced because the administrators above them won't fund it,
Okay.
the money's going somewhere, John.
Okay, so you want to redivert the money away
Yes,
from
it
the
needs to
interior.
go back to the
Is
rank and
anything
file.
else that you want to do?
Well, Congress needs to,
You want to build a wall throughout the entire Rio Grande? or not?
well, we need to go back to the things we said we were going to do. We were promised that we were going to have a wall. We were promised a fence. No, sir, we don't. In some parts of Texas, the wall stops and you
Okay,
can
let
walk
the-
around
let
it.
the senator weigh in.
You can walk around it.
There's a beautiful wall down there, but it's got huge gaps about every 2 miles.
Right.
And,
Right.
And I go, is there a gate or anything? No, the farmers can't get to their fields. It's the biggest federal waste of money, this wall, because they're going, well, the farmers got to work those fields down there. So they just go. No, there's no.
We're
No,
not
there's
going to
no-
have the peanut. You get to have.
There's
say
no
later.
gates down there. The feds came in and spent hundreds of millions. Let me weigh in on what, because, I don't know what Washington's doing. I know what Texas is doing.
I understand.
As I went down there and toured, I said, okay, give me just a rough estimation. How much are we catching on average of everything that's coming over? He said about 20%. 80% is getting through our net. And I said, okay, what if we were to reverse that? What would it take for us to catch 80%? Okay, I'd like to catch 100, but let's go for 80-20. And the response I got from the people that work for Texas to try to keep us safe is surprisingly not that much. Because you don't have to be everywhere all the time, but they have to think you're everywhere all the time. One thing we need, in my opinion, and I'm going to push for it in the budget, is a new Pilatus airplane. We've got this $4 million airplane that's got about $4.5 million of camera equipment, and I've been in it, flown in it. At 7,000 feet, they can see 10 miles into Mexico. They can see where they're doing the stage. You can almost read a license plate with it. You know, and I don't know whether that's top secret or not. We need it. I guess it's not.
Not anymore.
Don't worry, all of this is off the record.
We've got several other.
He said it.
Hold on a second. Okay. We've got several smaller planes, but we need one more of those big planes. That's $8.5 million. That's a drop in the bucket. Okay, there's other things we need equipment-wise, but that's not, you know, one of the most effective things we've used are just kind of high-tech game cameras that cost $500. We're seeing everything in these corridors that's coming across. We can't get to it because we don't have the manpower. We're just watching them. It's all on the internet, and they're watching it real time. Operation Drawbridge, I've called it. It's been a huge success, thanks to Commissioner Todd Staples. He got the money for that. We need 4 times more of those high-tech game cameras. But who cares whether you can see them coming across if you can't get there and catch them?
Okay, we're almost to the audience, but I just need to make one clarification. There is another challenge here at the border, which no one wants to talk about. But if we don't talk about uncomfortable facts here today, we're never going to talk about them. I was born in Tucson, Arizona. My brother was the deputy chief of police there for 20 years. He was the liaison to the Border Patrol. So he has some standing. He once had 2 cops who busted the biggest coyote in Tucson. And they raided his house and they got everything. They got the records, they got the vehicles, they got everything. And they were about to haul him away, and the coyote leader said, you know, I'm an asthmatic, and you don't want me dying on the floor of the police station. My asthma medicine is in that desk drawer. Can you just take it with you? So they opened the desk drawer, and there was $250,000 in cash in there.
That's true.
And he said, you know, you had a great raid. You got everything. You busted my ring. You're going to be promoted. You're going to get commendations. And everything worked perfectly in the raid, except I got out the back door at the last minute. And he looks at them. And they look at him, and they look at each other, and they turn to him and say, sorry, you're busted. We're taking you in. And by the way, there's no asthma medication in there. And I said to my brother, that's exactly the way law enforcement should work.
Sure.
And he said, yes. And he said, let me tell you something, though. I know my men. They've been partners together for 6 weeks. If they'd been partners for 6 months, I wouldn't be telling you this story. There is corruption at the border.
Yes.
We have to admit that. Because the money is so big.
Right.
How big is it?
Right.
In 1969, Richard Nixon declared a war on drugs at the border. And he put everything he could into it. We stopped every car for 5 months at the border. And then it fell apart. Partly because of corruption. There's too much money. I will tell you right now, there are many brave and many courageous and many, many wonderful Border Patrol agents. We only pick 1 out of every 30 applicants for the Border Patrol. But the corruption is still immense. Now, I don't have a solution for that, but you have to recognize that we're dealing with fallible human beings, and there's a lot of money involved in this. And it is true, it is much harder to regulate an illegal market than it is to regulate a legal market. Now we go to your questions. Why don't we go to this lady first, and then we'll sort of walk backwards.
By the way, thank you to all the panelists.
Could you introduce yourself too?
I am Adriana Boy, National Director of Justice Action, and thank you that Senator Estes made the difference between the issue of border control and immigration. But my question is for the expert on public policy from Cato Institute, and I would like if he please, the Cato Institute expert, could give the name of some organizations which have confused many of the conservative public voices on this issue of immigration. Those organizations who talk about population control agenda, there are people in the audience, so sometimes they get confused when they speak about this important issue of immigration. Could you talk about those organizations a little bit?
That was barely a question.
Thank you.
Barely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll give barely an answer. Now, the three organizations that are most known for have connections to the population control organizations, whose founders also founded numerous Planned Parenthoods across the country, served on the boards of negative population growth, zero population growth, all this, are Numbers USA, the Federation for American Immigration Reform, and the Center for Immigration Studies. So those are the three organizations that I believe that you're talking about.
They confuse many of the conservatives.
Okay, let's
So,
finish.
and they have done a good job at infiltrating the conservative movement. And if you went back to the 80s or the early 90s, you would see the people who were opposed to legal immigration would mostly be liberal Democrats associated with labor unions. Some of that has switched in some areas, part due to the infiltration of these groups.
And public employee unions.
And public employee unions. Now you have public employee unions who are on the anti-immigration side as well for other organizations. But those are the three groups that you're talking about. Numbers USA, Federation for American Immigration Reform, and the Center for Immigration Studies.
Okay, now, to be fair, I want to take a question from a person who has a point of view different from the last questioner, who has a point of view different from hers. Okay, this gentleman right here.
I have a question concerning what the state could do. I think there's maybe a practical thing where each officer, law enforcement officer, let me hold it. All officers, each person in the executive department takes an oath to support and defend the laws and the Constitution of the United States of America and of the state. And when we have counterfeiters, and they are caught by local police, they call the Secret Service, the appropriate federal agency. When they catch a bank robber, they call the FBI. When they catch somebody dealing with drugs, they call DEA. They have authority by their oath of office to arrest these people, hold them locally, and put them into federal custody. If it's explosives and firearms, they call ATF. If it's an illegal immigrant, the police chiefs say to the state, to the committees in Austin, oh, we don't have the manpower to do that, we won't do that, or they just flat say, or they get the city council in Houston says, we won't enforce federal immigration law. What can you do to hold people accountable to their oath of office that they already have authority to take care of the illegal aliens?
Good. Anyone who wants just to answer that?
Well, go ahead, Paul, if you want to.
No, go ahead.
Okay. We're looking at a lot of different things. There'll be a sanctuary cities bill that we'll look at. At the end of the day, the question you have to ask is, okay, why are they not calling ICE when they get somebody? Because a lot of times cities will just go, if you have reasonable suspicion, just let them go on, because we just can't deal with it. I think the reason is because ICE is not responsive to them. If they rounded up 1,000 people, ICE what would they do with them? Put them in a camp?
They come to Bell County Jail every morning out of Waco.
Yeah.
But then the supervisors then say, well, we don't have enough bed space.
Yeah, you're pointing out a huge problem, and it's something that I hope we can make some progress this legislative session. Thank you.
Let's see.
Yeah.
We'll take this question, and then we'll go to over there. And then I'm not going to forget the back.
I've met that guy before.
Just keep the questions and answers brief.
All right, my question is for Mr. Nowrasteh.
You can call me Alex.
Alex. Okay. As if the panel hasn't gotten controversial enough, John Fund alluded briefly to the Nixon's efforts along the border in 1969, and to paraphrase Ronald Reagan, we had a war on drugs and drugs won. Are we ever going to be able to truly secure or have safe commerce across cross-border commerce as long as there is this massive demand for this black market product here in the United States?
No. And I will say this in addition to that. No, you're absolutely right. And the reason why is if they become more effective enforcers, the price goes up, more people enter and try to import this stuff because there's more profit motive. It's the same thing that small businesses and every other business uses to operate. It's a profit motive. Now, to talk about smuggling people and the coyotes, it costs right now $5,000 if you're a Mexican to pay a coyote to bring you into the United States by land, $9,000 by sea. From China, it's $75,000, India, $60,000. Prices from all over the world. Do you really think that the federal government, which can't deliver mail on time or profitably, is going to stop something like this just by throwing law enforcement resources at it, you're kidding yourself. You've never dealt with the government if you can think that, seriously. The way you fix this...
they're from the government. They're here to help us.
The way you fix this is what Ronald Reagan talked about in the last speech he gave us of his administration, was you have high walls, but very wide gates. You legalize a lot of the flow, and then you can focus your scarce law enforcement resources on the actual bad threats. Don't focus on tomato pickers or raiding computer factories where programmers work. That's a waste. Every dollar spent on that is a waste. Focus only on security threats, on real criminals, on people who actually mean to do us harm, not on the guy who wants to come and mow my lawn. All right, that guy's not a threat.
Okay, we're going to take another question here, and I'm going to go to the back
Interesting.
next.
For those of you who...
Can you please stand so everyone hears you?
Yeah. Jim Spice from San Antonio. For those of you who have gone to the border and talked to these various business councils, what kind of support do you get for the idea of security on our border from the valley over to El Paso?
I'll handle that. There's a variety of opinions as there is with anything. Some of the businesses want very much to have more security because it means that their customers are safer. On the other hand, the National Guard presence down there has concerned some of the businesses because it creates an image of danger. And so they're anxious to get rid of the National Guard. And the Texas Border Patrol, I'm suggesting, would be what's termed off the pavement. These guys won't be in black and whites pulling people over. These guys will be, the idea is that they would be working off the pavement in the bush trying to stop this stuff where it's coming across. So there's a mixture of sense about what's going on down in the border with the businesses.
Paul, let me just
go ahead.
interject. We've already got that to a certain extent with our, I don't know what they call them. There's guys that get out there in undercover and camo and everything. Yeah, but I guess, and I want to see your bill, of course. How many people are you talking about, and what kind of price are we talking about on your bill?
Well, under my bill, we create 1,000 slots for DPS, which would mean 300 and some odd at any one shift, permanently stationed down there. And I think it's going to be around $250 million a year.
Another idea that was along a similar vein that was floated at our last meeting of the Legislative Budget Board was creating a new battalion of, I think they call them battalions, don't they, Texas Rangers, of 50 more. There's 150 right now, that'd be 200, and have them be border specialists. That's all very expensive, but at the end of the day, and I repeat what I say, the federal government, if we're going to be doing this, should be paying us to do it.
Well, I agree.
But
we're going to ask them to.
I'm not getting anywhere there.
We're spending that money now.
Anyone in the
anyway.
way back? Yeah, please, stand up, you're next.
Let Senator Hall ask a question too, please.
Okay, Senator Hall will be after this one. Wait for the microphone, and then we're going to have Senator Hall after you.
Bob Schofield from San Antonio. Many talk about supporting the rule of law. And my question is, the legislators there, do you want to support that rule? Look over at the.
Well, let me.
If you want to support that,
let me just say this.
There's a problem.
All of us in public office took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States and of Texas to the best of our ability. So help me God. No, I don't accept that. But that's in our federal government's infinite wisdom what they've come up with. So what do? We support this till we change it. Okay. We don't break the rule of law. We change the rule of law if it's wrong. And so that needs to be changed.
Can I say one thing about that? In our Western tradition of the rule of law, there are three components that are necessary. 1, predictable outcomes. 2, equal application. And 3, consistent with our traditions of liberty. This breaks all of those. Every day. You want to be consistent with the rule of law? I think you change this. I mean, bad laws, in my opinion, are for reform and not enforcing.
Amen.
But
John-
I think everybody agrees on this panel. about
John,
that.
I want to jump in here and say one thing. I don't think that our legislators have enough conversations with our congressional delegation, because with the exception of a couple of people that Texas sends to Washington, I would say Senator Cruz and Congressman Gohmert and Larry and Mr. Weber have been very outspoken on this issue, but we hear the sound of crickets from the rest of them. I would say that the state of Texas, our legislators need to have a conversation with the Texas delegation about standing up for Texas more than they do. I mean, we're sitting here with this big bill.
Next. Where's
You know.
Senator Hall? Please, go ahead. Can you wait for the microphone? Thanks.
I will say they get real friendly with us, the Texas legislature, around redistricting time.
Yeah.
Birthday time.
Yeah.
Mine is a comment, but I will put a question mark at the end.
I'm going to be firm.
No, I've got a question mark.
A real
at the end.
question.
No,
I'm treating everyone equally.
I agree, and I'm glad to hear the dialogue that we recognize the difference between our illegal alien problem and border security, and that we need to address
And
them
the question
separately.
is-
And the question is, when we keep talking about it's going to be expensive to do this, do you think we can make that a net cost assessment? Because it is very expensive for us to not do anything.
That's right.
And so when we talk about what it's going to cost us,
Okay.
can we get the net in there?
Any comments?
Yes.
So as a published, as an economist, I write all this stuff. I have a book chapter coming out in a book for Texas Tech University out in Lubbock, I believe, book chapter about the fiscal costs of immigration going forward. So I'd love to talk with you about that more in detail. The long and the short of it is, in the long run, the net fiscal benefits and costs of immigration are about zero. They and their children mostly pay for it over the long run. I can go into details about that with you. In terms of the enforcement angle, it costs the federal government about $18,000 to deport somebody. So if they were to deport somewhere around 10 million people, it would cost $250 billion just in outlays. Like, that's just the cost. Now, we can talk about the other sort of effects of that, but that puts it in perspective for
Okay,
you.
We're going to have to give someone the last word. Someone here has the last word.
I want to have it.
The good news is you get the last word. The bad news is it's a brief one. Go ahead.
And no disrespect to my colleague down here on the end of the table, but I will tell you that my friends at Heritage Action have a different set of numbers as to the cost of to Texas and the United States on the cost of illegal immigration.
Okay, we'll
Through a
have to
static analysis that's not dynamic.
Next event we're going to have is a think tank debate. Okay. I want to thank the panelists, just like last year. Some of you were here last year. I think we had a great panel. I think we represented all points of view. The audience was awesome. You asked great questions and you held to the strictures. So let's give them all a round of applause.